All right. Well, thank you all for taking some time out of your Sunday here to join with me in sharing a little bit of the heart of this recent pilgrimage that I went on with the Camino. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into the River of Souls bit as we get more deep into the sharing today. But the most important thing is I want to acknowledge again that we're taking some time to be together, to listen to this heart journey and the why behind it. What brought me to this place of taking this pilgrimage across the north of Spain? So I always like to start with just a little bit of a way to kind of help ground us into what we're doing here together. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. How many times in our lives do we say that we're going to do something and then we keep tucking it aside? We keep waiting for something in life to change. Sometimes that life change is thrown at us, such as someone passing or a major life change, getting married, starting a new job. But the heart of the pilgrim's soul is drawn to just take that first step and set things into motion. And so my invitation to you all today is, where is it in your own life that there is perhaps something that has been calling you, and what's in the way, so that you can maybe change that story and take that first step. So one of the things that is a frequently used symbol for people walking on the Camino is the scallop shell. And I've read dozens of different reasons why people believe that the scallop shell has become a part of the Camino. Not only that it's in the symbolized iconography that you see along the way, but also the uh, people are wearing it on their pouches or on their backpacks. And the heart of my takeaway with the scallop shell is essentially, as humans coming into this world, we lose along the way a sense of our innocence, a sense of the pure that sits at the heart of all things, sits in the core of who we are. And that just like a scallop that has this little juicy, soft uh, being that lives inside of it, that there is this hard protection that we create on the outside of ourselves. And along the Camino, we slowly draw that hardness off. We slowly draw off that protection that we put around ourselves and allow that soft being to emerge from within. And this is very much what I found along the way. The first week and a half was very much about being with myself and being empty and being in deep quiet, connecting with the nature, and slowly pulling off all of the tangents and the chords and the things that my mind thinks that it needs to focus on, the social, the mental constructs, and to do away with those and to allow this just pure being that sits at the heart of all things to emerge forward. So we're going to come back to the scallop shell uh, along our journey here this afternoon too in these reflections. Um, which is to kind of give you an overview of how we're going to spend our time here. So I want to just really initially give a contextual background to the pilgrimage, both in a historic context, but also in my own personal connection with that. And then that will dovetail into intentions, like how important it is to set intentions for a journey such as this. And then how those become personalized, like what were my intentions for this journey and how does that get set into motion. Then I want to get a little bit deeper into the sharing the road. So in sharing the road in this section, I'm actually going to share a lot more photos from along the way. Share a little bit of the day-to-day interactions, some of the people that I walked with, some of the reflections that I had along the way. And also what were some of the deeper unfoldings that occurred along the way as well. And then I want to just go into a little poetic, into the heart of, here's the, what was done, here's how it was done, but like underneath of it all, the river of souls is really the invitation into the deeper heart and the essence of this journey. And so then I want to just open the floor. We'll just see where we're at with time and flow at that point in time as well. But again, if you have questions or thoughts that come up as I'm sharing here and as I'm sharing the photos and telling some of the stories, feel free to go ahead and ask, and we'll start in. So first of all, I'm not sure if everyone realizes, but the Camino literally means like the road or the way. And one of the prayers that is and offerings that is often made along the way when you run into someone, when you pass someone, when you're passing someone on the streets, in a shop, in one of the restaurants, in one of the alberges, there is everyone says to one another, they say buen camino. Buen camino means the good way, but it also is like travel well. It also means to go with God, to go with the spirit of the road, the spirit of the way. And so opening myself to the walking of the way was really important. And so before I go into a little bit more of where I'm at, I just want to talk a little bit more about the Camino de Santiago, in perspective of the pilgrimage and therefore why I was drawn to this. So literally the Camino de Santiago de Compostela is the way of St. James in the field of stars. And so the Camino in general runs in kind of a capillary action. Here's where again the symbol of the scallop shell comes in really important, is you've got all of these rays, all these different paths that all lead to one endpoint, both to Santiago as well as to the traditional endpoint of Finisterre or Fischterre, out by the sea. So the Santiago, St. James was one of the apostles of Christ who brought the teachings of the Gnostic Christian traditions into the Gallic northwest of Spain. And at some point, due to early persecution by the Empire of Rome, St. James was called back to Canaan, back to the Outrimer, back to the heart of where the Abrahamic traditions come from, to serve, because so many people had been martyred, they needed his support. Eventually, one of the stories goes is that his bones were brought were brought via ship out to Galicia and interred in a cave there. My brother Sam from Sligo also thinks that it's possible that the bones could have be from a more ancient source as well. One of the things that's really important to know about where the cathedral in Santiago is located in Spain, in Galicia, prior to Christianity, was an oracle site. There was actually like a beautiful uh, forest grove there where a spring emerged up out of the ground, and so it was a place where people who were on pilgrimage prior to becoming the Camino de Santiago, it was a traditional route that many people from our Gaelic heritage would recess on to make their way out to Finisterre, out to the end of the earth, where they could watch the sunset over the endless western sea. And the grove there with the spring emerging out of the ground was where people would ritually bathe and prepare themselves to either sit with the oracles in what is now Santiago, or to make their way further onto the end of the earth at Finisterre. So under the field of stars, we're essentially walking we're on the earth, walking out the embodiment of the Milky Way as it stretches across the horizon. So one of the books that I read prior to going to help prepare me, it was written by a gentleman, Phil Casanel, who was contemporary of John O'Donoghue, as well as uh, many of the storytellers that come from the generation before me. His book was called The Art of Pilgrimage, and really is excellent in spanning the beauty of pilgrimage in any tradition, any place on the planet. But what he help my heart and mind to focus on was, why am I doing this journey? Who am I inviting to walk with me? I think that was one of the things that was really important. Like, first and foremost, it was actually my father that invited me to walk the Camino. And with the passing of my daughter, and I believe that Ayla's mom just joined us a few minutes ago too. So Christy, welcome here with us today. Thank you. Was typically, most people historically walked pilgrimages because they were unwinding some, as we would say in Irish, like a geish. They were unwinding a taboo, unwinding something that is off, or they're paying condolence for something that keeps them from God, keeps them from the divine. I was walking to, in my own way, honor my daughter, but for my own sense was to also give myself the space to completely unplug, leave the world behind, and open my heart to a spiritual pilgrimage that people of my heritage and tradition have been walking for thousands of years. And not only that, it's something that is still being walked by hundreds of thousands of people every year. And so we're going to get a little bit deeper into the heart of that as we open. But one of the things that I wanted to do was just pull back contextual, looking at Western pilgrimage from a magical standpoint and from an alchemist standpoint in the West. And so these are pre-Christian as well as Christian traditions fused together. And so there are 4 major pilgrims routes in Europe, and in Western alchemy, those synergize with the 4 original suits that are also classically tucked into both our card decks that we play with, as well as with like the classic Rider uh, uh, tarot deck as well. So just from a mental perspective, just for a moment, and then we'll come back into the heart. Again, I just feel like it's really important to create a context. The Camino de Santiago is, in the Western alchemy, considered to be the road of power, of like reclaiming something that has been lost. And so again, for me, it was the loss of my daughter, and like all the questioning that came up inside of myself within that context. And I mean, I literally took over the last 6, 7 months, I've taken my complete belief structure and dissected it down to the ground and below the ground into the roots, like finding where the places, like where are the distortions, where are any places that I had to justify decisions in order to make sure I was earning enough resources to make sure that my daughter was getting the proper support that she needed, because she was having such a difficult life. And so the Camino de Santiago is the road of power, you know. And then another pilgrimage that of course is classic is also the way to Rome. And many people in the Western traditions considered this pilgrimage a way to refine the clarity of communication, both in this world as well as with the other world, with the spirit, with the angels, with the saints, with the she. Um, and the third classic path, of course, is the way to Jerusalem, the Grail path, the path of healing. But for the most part, like most people that would walk all the way to Jerusalem were walking to call in some miracle or a balance for some remiss or something that was off. And the ways within the context of Ireland, is some would call it the secret road. I don't know how secret it is. More so, it's that the path of the Holy Spirit, or the path of the Spirit, of refinement of deep sanctuary, or deep peace, the connection with Holy Spirit, the connection with the she, with the immortals, with the angels. And so just wanted to create that pictorially just to give a context. So the Camino, which is the first one that comes up here, again, generally running from east to west. I did not put all of the different routes on here because there's thousands of routes. I mean, you can start in Ireland, you can start in Sweden, you can start in Norway, you can start in Finland, you can start in Turkey or Syria or Israel, like all of these myriads of paths. But by the time you start getting into the southwest of France, they become the pathways become very established. And then there's also multiple pathways coming up through Portugal and up through Spain as well. And then all dovetailing in within a few days of Santiago and emptying into the heart of Santiago itself, and then on to the end to Finisterre. The other pathway is the path of Rome, the pilgrim's route to Jerusalem and Israel, the path of the heart, and then the path of the green diamond, the path of the spirit. And then just to put those in context of the Tarot, the Camino is the way of the swords, and the way to Rome is wands, and of course the Grail to Jerusalem, and coins or for Ireland. So the Outrimer, the heart of the Holy Land, of course, during the Dark Ages became a very unsafe place for our people to visit. And while this was the greatest pilgrimage that most people did historically, as most of us know from a lot of the classic stories of the Crusades, it wasn't very safe. The rise of Islam was clashing with Christianity, Judaism, which we're still experiencing today. So part of the reason many people choose to walk the Camino is because it is safe. It is similar cultures. It's Western culture, and while there's still a beauty in supporting asceticism and surrender and letting go of the world, there is a sense of familiarity. Um, and so the Camino itself, again, being in the West, just set up for the heart of things. And what I'm being called to do more of this summer and next summer and beyond is to walk some of the traditional ways in Ireland. I'm going to be bringing the remainder of my daughter's ashes over to Ireland for one of the ways that we'll be walking this summer in September. Um, and some of them were left along the route and along the Camino too. But just for perspective, Ireland, of course, sitting off the west coast of the UK, for if any of you aren't aware of where Ireland is. The traditional routes, we've got the St. Patrick's route, which goes from Rathcrogan to Croagh Patrick. We have St. Brandon's Way or Manannan's Way that goes from Loughgar out to Mount Brandon or Slee Brandon. We've got St. Kevin's Way, which goes from Kildare out to Glendalough. And then we've got a few smaller ones, St. Finbarr's Way, the Way of the Wells, and also the traditional route of the High Court of Ireland and through the Sacred Center of Ireland and Ishna, and then our final pathway up in Ulster, winding out from Armagh to the Governor's Mountain. I'm trying to remember what the name of his mountain is offhand right now, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to just pause for a moment and reset. I just wanted to give that context of like the why. Again, the bigger piece here is my father invited me to walk the way with him. And at 72, how can I say no to that? And then when Ayla passed away this past November, I very quickly realized well, we're all going there eventually, right? I'm realizing my own mortality in a more sober way than perhaps I ever had before. And now is the time to do those things that we keep setting aside and saying, I can't do it yet. I can't do it yet. I can't do it yet. And I hate to say that it's because my daughter passed that some of these things were set into motion, but a lot of the things that I did get to do with my daughter over the years also hinged on that place too, of knowing that we could go anytime. So let's have these journeys, let's have these experiences together. So I want to kind of tee up like the heart of why I went. Some of you might be familiar with Simon Sinek's TED Talks, but like the heart of what I love about him is like the simplicity of the focus of a target in our life. We know what I did. We know that I walked the Camino. We know how I did it. I met my father in Madrid and we walked 417 kilometers in Santiago and then on to the sea. The heart of it is the why, the why behind it. And so for me, I think my mom always says that the hardest and the best thing that she loved about me was the fact that I would never accept just an answer given. I always wanted to know the why behind something. So of course that's very important for me in the doing of something. It's like, I'm not going to do something half-hearted. I'm going to put my entire soul into something. I'm going to pour myself in until I become it. So Gautama Buddha invites us into that remembrance. You cannot travel the path until you become the path. Become the reason for the unfolding. So some of my reasons, of course, I grew up Catholic and I went to Jesuit high school, so there's tradition involved here. A lot of the boys that are at St. Xavier right now, they actually just walked the Camino starting right after I got back, and so I got to connect with them and share a blessing with them, and just such a beautiful thing to see these 17 and 18-year-old boys setting out with this intent of something that is perhaps more mind, but is the invitation into something deeper. So from tradition and also for religious perspective, when my daughter passed, when Christy and I's daughter passed, like I was ripped open. In some ways it was like, and Christy might attest to this as well, but there's a way that it was almost like there was a knowing that was coming. There was part of me that had been mourning her for years, but when it happens, what do we fall into? I fell into the faith of what I grew up with. I fell into some of the Catholic traditions of singing and chanting the rosary with my mother and singing and praying with my father. But so too, also really fell deeply back into what was a major part of my 20s and 30s, the practice of bhakti, of singing, of chanting, ecstasy, bliss, crying out the songs, but then also like the Irish and the Scottish traditions that have come so alive for me in the last 10, 12 years of my life as well, and to like sink into 2 weeks of just gorgeous wake of singing together, praying together, chanting together, open doors rolling through the house. It's just such a beautiful gift. And so this too goes into why I was going to honor these spiritual and religious traditions that are part of my journey, but also to like honor the dreaming, the visions in life, my own ashlins, if you will, the angels that have come into my life, both in human form temporarily as well as dreams, have constantly like called me on to not give up on the beauty of the world and to track that. And also the journey of going to some of the sacred wells in Ireland and Scotland and Wales, to places where we can unfurl the bindings and the knots that are wrapped around us, and to go there in prayer, such as this picture here from Breed's Well out near the cliffs of Moher. Um, Releasing suffering, releasing pain, to walk through pain, to allow the pain to momentarily become something physical, and then to transcend it, to allow it to become something to springboard off of. Um, but I think the thing that always draws me on more than anything is the beauty of this world, this bioluminescent phytoplankton growing on this, or that it washes into this bay on Vieques in one of the Puerto Rican islands. Something that calls, just the beauty that calls us on, can call me on in this world. But also walking for fellowship, walking to be together. One of the things that I was invited by a couple of my uh, Jesuit friends before I walked was, who are you inviting to walk with you? What saints are you inviting to walk with you? What beings are you going to look to for strength in this time of trial, and to help promulgate you through this time, to help with clarity and with strength. And so really calling those beings close. And of course I walked for family. I walked because my dad invited me to walk, and think how many times I invited Ayla to do things, and sometimes she wasn't in the mood and she wouldn't do it, and sometimes she would make a big yes and throw herself into something, and with that just came so much beauty when she would find that deeper why inside of herself and throw her at it. And so I found that through the invitation of my father, through the bright spirit of my daughter passing on to the other side, to bring me closer home, um, through this walk. So again, some of the symbols of the Camino, the walking staff, the gourd for drinking water out of, but again, the scallop shell, like peeling back the hardness that we have to wear to be in this world, to come soft and vulnerable with strangers, with a landscape that I did not know, but somehow it was like coming home, remembering. But frequently when people start walking the journey, when they're given their pilgrim's passport, which I think I brought, yeah, I did. So each country has its own pilgrim's passport. I don't know if you can see me or not too. I don't remember exactly how this works, but you get this at the start of the journey, and then they also give you a, a scallop shell with St. James cross on it as well. But about 3 weeks before I left, I was cleaning out some old boxes in the closet and I had this junk box, like I'm sure we all have a few junk boxes laying around. And in the junk box was my daughter's nightlight from when she was a toddler. And I don't know if you remember this, Christy, but we had got her this nightlight that had the scallop shell on it, and that was what made the diffused light in her bedroom. Um, and I can't believe I still had it. I have no idea why I kept it all those years. I mean, the thing had not been plugged in probably 12, 12 years. Um, and so I immediately knew that I was not going to be getting a scallop shell from someone when I got to Spain, but that I had to make my own. So a few things here. I painted St. James cross on there for the sake of tradition, but I also Saint Bridget, or the goddess Bridget, was also one of the main beings that I wanted to invite to walk with me. So I hand painted those on there. And I guess all the years of teaching people how to make Bridget's crosses out of rushes, I was able to like actually structurally take it apart. And then the necklace is a combination of beads from necklaces that Ayla had given me over the years. And so I was able to put this all together and create something that was very personal, and to like wind myself into the creation uh, of this particular shell. So I invited St. James, St. Bridget, and my little lady to walk with me under the field of stars to the field of stars. So I'm going to take a breath here for a second. Um, Anybody have anything they want to ask before I get into kind of the heart of like the flow of the sharings? Because this part's going to be more focused on the fellowship and the day-to-day and picture sharing. Does anybody have any thoughts or anything you want to share? You can just take yourself off mute if you did mute yourself.
Well, this is Carl. I threw a question in the chat, and we were going through the four paths. You know, you mentioned Ireland, of course, and it seemed that you were describing a spiritual path rather than a physical path. I was just wondering about that. And then you went through the different paths that occurred, that were in Ireland. But in general, it seemed to me that I took a picture of those four paths, but the paths of Ireland seem to be more like a spiritual journey than a physical journey. Am I correct on that or not?
Both. I mean, all of them are going to be both, but I think the heart of what you're getting at, it's like when you look at the actual image, like creating a diamond. One of the things, and I'm really glad that my friend and mentor Steve Myers is on here too, because I think Steve is probably one of he may be the only, but he's definitely the best fairy historian in the entire planet right now. And some of his writings, he gets really deep into the works of Fiona MacLeod, who was an Ashleen, or a vision, like a being, a she being, a spirit who animated William Sharp uh, during the Celtic Renaissance at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. And one of the things that Fiona MacLeod, as well as some of the other members of the Order of the Celtic Mysteries and texts and old or middle Irish, often refer to what is called the green diamond. And
Mm,
the green diamond is sort of it's the sanctuary that is created by the angels, by the she, as a way of allowing for sanctuary. And it is my belief that it's sort of like the otherworld skin of Ireland, or if you stretch it back a little bit further, um, the otherworld skin of the entire Gaelic lands creates this giant green diamond when you thread together all the sacred places.
mm,
And so that's where that symbol comes in, but it really is referring to the sanctuary of that is both this world and the other. So it's both paradise and this realm. And when we sink into a state of rapture or wonder, deep, deep beauty, awe, ecstasy, like we then become a bridge that helps us connect that realm of paradise back here with what's here on the earth again. So that's like the kind of higher end of it. The lower, the basal end of it is, yes, there are these traditional pilgrims ways in Ireland. Most of the pilgrims paths in Ireland are more like 1 to 2 or 3 days. But I've been working with the Irish Pilgrim Society in the threading together of these historic pilgrims paths, and so we're going to be walking some of those pilgrims paths next summer. And these are basically beginning at the sacred centers of in Ireland out to the associated mountain for that particular region. But I can get into that a little more deeply another time, Carl. But that's a good place setter for you.
Yeah, thanks.
You betcha. Um, Anybody else?
Jeremy, I'm curious what the gourds were on the staffs with the shells, the pear-shaped gourds.
Okay, yeah. So traditionally, I think a lot of people used gourds as a canteen, as a water bottle, right? So a pilgrim would essentially leave everything behind except for the clothes they were wearing and their cloak, and then they would have a staff that they could lean into for the hard climbs through the mountains, or if they were not as sure of foot. Um, and so they would drink their water out of the gourd along the way, and then the shells were used both for uh, taking food, like alms that were given food along the way, also to drink wine out of. So they've become sort of symbolic. Like you'll see some people walking the Camino with a staff and a gourd and a shell. I did not feel called to this, wearing a staff or a gourd. I mean, actually, you can see from my backpack here, you can, if you look up at the top, I've got, Ayla's shell up there. And then I was weaving, or not weaving, but making Bridget's crosses with the rushes along the way and leaving them as offerings at the holy wells and the trees. But yeah, so the gourd is really about carrying your water. You might see that I also have a 21st century water bottle on there as well. I don't personally like the taste of water coming out of a gourd. So, um, anybody else? Okay. Well, again, like, pipe in as need be. I mean, and again, we can handle more at the end as well. But again, I think one of the most important things that I learned on the latter half of my trip was that while the first 300 kilometers were really about the letting go of the hard outer shell, untangling the mind, untangling the heart, if you will. As the journey progressed, it really became about the fellowship with those that we're sharing the road with, sharing the way with. Um, and the beauty that comes with that. And I'll just say one thing here about fellowship. I mean, I know some of you have been to rainbow gatherings with me. Some of you have never been to something like that, but like have been to something else where we take ourselves outside of the world, place ourselves deeply into this enclave or a cloister temporarily, which then allows for something really beautiful to happen, which is almost like a quickening. There's something speeds up. We're able to untangle thoughts. We're able to move through pain and suffering. We're able to move into ecstasy and sharing and bliss and beauty. And so there were many times along the way where I found myself walking to someone I didn't even know what their name was. I might know what country they were from, what their primary language was. Um, but then somehow we're sharing things with each other that oftentimes we don't give ourselves the permission to share with those that we're closest with. Perhaps it's being in motion. Perhaps it's the walking. Perhaps it's because we're all being called to this spiritual quest, this spiritual journey, to this pilgrimage together. but the deep sharing, the sharing of food, the sharing of walking, the sharing of the sound of our footsteps, the sound of footsteps becoming the key meter, becoming the key mechanism that creates the rhythm in our life, which then becomes the base of songs and prayers to be offered. Such a gift to first have fellowship, the communion of saints, if you will, and then the communion of angels and the communion of the she, but then to have that embodied temporarily in these amazing beings from all over the planet. And most of them I will probably never see again. And either way, it's such a gift. Fellowship, sharing the road. This was a piece of graffiti I saw about 100 kilometers out. It was the temptation of the snake drifting over the free, call a taxi. So Dad and I walked 417 kilometers, so about 260 miles. And that was 13 days of walking to Santiago, and then Dad stopped in Santiago. He was very tired and he was so skinny. His belt actually only, he was on his last hole on his belt loop. So he said he needed to fatten up and rest. So he took the bus and met me at Finisterre a few days later. So I walked the last 100 kilometers in 3 days by myself. And I had oh my gosh, it's supposed to be 6.3 kilogram pack. I had a 14-pound pack. For anybody that's thinking about doing the Camino or any sort of pilgrim's walk like this, everyone I've talked to always says, get your pack under 20 pounds. And if you can get it under 15 pounds, you'll be happy as can be. I wanted mine under 15 pounds in case something happened to my dad and I would have to run somewhere in order to get help, because we left, I left my device behind. Obviously, Dad got some photos along the way. But just to kind of show that pictorially, so we started in the town of Lyon. We flew into Madrid, took a train up to Lyon, had a night there, and then we had 13 days of walking to Santiago, and then the final 3 days on my own to Finisterre. So the way that I am going to continue in this telling and sharing is just to kind of flow from a day-to-day basis. So we left Lyon after we went to a pilgrim's mass and received a blessing there. And the first day, the road, it was a lot of road walking. It was walking on asphalt, walking on concrete. I don't think my feet have ever felt so sore as they did at the end of that day. We walked 31 kilometers or 19 miles. By the end of the day, I did not feel like I had feet. I felt like I had hot bricks attached to the bottoms of my legs. I thought of all the years that I've done firewalks and how powerful those experiences were. Imagine doing a firewalk all day. The beauty of walking somewhere with intent and having the entire way, like the picture you see down in the lower left, you see a lot of these 3 terraced hand-carved granite crosses, and on one side of the cross will be Christ crucified, and on the other side typically was the Mother Mary, sometimes the Magdalene, sometimes Mother Mary holding the infant Jesus. And so the side from where you're coming, facing east, is where Christ was on. So you're moving through suffering, and then on the side towards where you're going is the mother, like holding you in nurture. But the road that first day was so intensive, not because we saw a lot of cars. I mean, I think we maybe saw 2 pilgrims, maybe 3 pilgrims the first day that we walked, but it was just intensive because it was very flat. You could see the mountains that we knew we would eventually get to off in the distance, and kind of like dreams that you may have had where you can't quite get somewhere no matter how fast you're running. Maybe you're sinking into quicksand or whatever it might be. It's just like those mountains weren't getting any closer. So Dad and I were just like, let's do this thing. We're just gonna move it. The picture on the far right is fascinating. Actually, it's in both of these pictures. Very, very famous bridge in the town of Hospital de Orbego. It is, this was built, I want to say in the, don't fact check me on this one, it's sometime in the 12th or 13th century, but sometime around the 14th century, there was some sort of caballero, some knight who the woman that he loved refused him. And so he decided he and a couple of his knight brothers were going to go and stand on this bridge on their horses. And anybody that come and didn't say that Spanish women were the most beautiful women in the world, they would challenge them to jousting. So then, of course, knights from all over Europe were coming to clear them from the bridge. And it took, I think, like 300 plus jousts before they were able to clear the bridge and allow pilgrims to pass through who did not think that Spanish women were the most beautiful in the world. I think the other thing that was really significant in this area was this was wine country. So the pictures down on the bottom right all have to do with wine. They're not hobbit houses, but these are little like we have them in Switzerland and a lot in Scandinavian countries as well, where there are places where people garden and they'll have little sheds where they can live in the garden. Well, they have a little shed where they can have a fire, where they can drink their wine that they're storing underneath the earth, just to keep it cool. So 31 kilometers, arriving into Hospital de Orpego. This is our first night walking. We made absolutely no plans of places we were staying. Everything was just in the moment. The only plans we had was flying to Madrid, getting on a train, and then off we go. So it was really beautiful, like in this day and age where everything is planned, everything is done through our little devices that we carry around that supposedly make things simple for us. And my God, to be able to just let go and not have a single plan and just walk and just show up and find a village and find a refuge or an albergue that you could stay in, and be fed. You know, sometimes the meals were way more than you could eat. Sometimes it's like practically nothing. I lost, I think, a little over 10 pounds on this journey. So let's take a look at day 2. So on the second day, we went through the Templar city of Ponferrada, and the journey here, again, still fairly intensive, starting to get into a little bit of topography, a lot of the iconography along the way, a lot of angels, again, a lot of the crucifixes. One of the things that really started to stand out to me as we were going at this point in the journey was just how much respect there was for pilgrims along the way. How many people, at the very least, when they would pass you, connect eyes for a moment, give you a smile, buen camino, you know, have a good journey, have a good way, go with a blessing. And, you know, it's one thing to walk hundreds of miles or kilometers, but then to have the cultural reinforcement of the spiritual journey upheld the entire way was gorgeous. One of the things I would say is that out of 10 walkers, 8 of them were walking them for secular reasons. One of them was walking for religious reasons, and one of them was walking for spiritual. But by the time everyone had gotten to Santiago, everyone was walking it for spiritual reasons. And I feel it's a really important thing to acknowledge. A lot of people were just thought they were just walking this journey because, oh, I'm in a transition. I start a new job in a month. So hey, I'll go walk 500 or 600 kilometers of the Camino. I heard it's a neat thing to do. But to go and to sync up with people who were walking for spiritual or religious reasons early on really gave this beauty and the power of reinforcement. Like every day, my father and I were praying together, singing together. My father wanted to say the rosary every day. I taught him pseudo taught him the rosary in Irish, which was really sweet. Most of the time it was me reciting it, and then we'd go back to English after some time. But the beauty of being in these first few days, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide too. These first like 3 or 4 days, being in so much intense physical. Most of the time, I would start off the day feeling great. End of the day, again, the burning feet. But one of the things that I had in the back of my mind, remembering from playing Division 1 sports all the way through, and then university sports, was that when we do something that's really difficult, especially physically, our bodies will adjust rapidly, especially if we take care of our bodies and we're in pretty good shape. So I knew that by day 4 or 5 that I would not be going through such deep and excruciating physical pain. But at the same time, some part of me, and maybe there's some little sadomasochist inside of me, but there's like some part of me that like enjoyed the pain to some extent, because what the pain reminded me of was the pain that my daughter had walked through for so long in her life. And it was a physical, here it is. Like there are so many people that are carrying so much pain, whether it's physical or mental, spiritual, emotional, and to be able to sync up with that was a really, really powerful experience. Um, and I would say it is also really powerful to be able to let that down. And I'm going to share a little bit more of that in one of the upcoming slides here. You can see I'm in the mountains now. I'm in total bliss, even though my feet are still hurting. We're in the borderlands, starting to get into what is traditional Galician territory. So now people aren't speaking the Castilian anymore. Now we're speaking Galician, which is much more similar to Portuguese. So there was this beauty in like, oh, language switch, great. And I'm starting to think of all my Brazilian friends, like Naveen and Satya, etc., and just really feeling into that. So we're in the mountains. We got dumped on with rain. It was just absolutely beautiful to get poured on with rain. But I think the reason I wanted to go ahead and to move into this next slide was the picture up in the upper left. Where we've got this like wire fence, like classic cattle fence, with all of these wooden crosses and towels on it. So a tau is the Franciscan or the St. Francis's cross, also a Greek symbol. It's kind of like the letter T. So we were just really starting to get into the forest, big chestnut trees. I've got this picture of the vineyard down below, because to me, like the vineyards, while they were beautiful and I love grapes, it kind of reminded me of little orcs. I'm going into like Middle Earth here for a moment. Let's just have fun with it. Like they just looked like a bunch of orcs like marching across the landscape. And I thought of like all of the effort that it required to like rip all the trees out in order so that these grapes could grow. So up in the upper left, like we're finally starting to get into native forest, and I'm excited. I'm botanizing. I'm eating wild greens all along the way, because it's basically the only way you're going to get greens on the Camino anyways. You pretty much just you get bread. They give you wine. I didn't drink the wine that much, but lots of bread, and some meat. But I got to this point where we crossed a stream and I started seeing this fence that we're seeing in the upper left. And the fence was covered with crosses. And of course, like I go to Fae Realm immediately, and I'm like, oh, what are all these crosses? Like, what are they trying to keep keep the Fae people from the forest spirits from like coming into the way? And the more, it was like miles of walking like this. And the more I walked, and the more I was also then feeling my own physical pains, especially in my feet. I realized what was actually happening here was that there was this solidarity. There was a solidarity of people letting go of their suffering, setting down their cross, in Christian terminology. Like we all carry our crosses, we all carry our suffering, and realizing that I don't need to carry that suffering. I could acknowledge it and respect it. And it all happened, and partly I've got this picture of this trout lily lookalike, um, Erythronium, because it was when I saw this flower that I fell down on my knees in tears. I saw this flower. It was on this side of the fence, and it just hit me in a way that was just like beauty crosses all borders. And when the tears came, that's when I could let go of another part of that hard shell around me and see all of these wooden crosses for what was revealing themselves in this time. That we don't need to suffer alone, that we can come together and rise from suffering and pain into beauty and into grace. Um, so by day 5, we're starting to get really deep in the heart of the mountains. From the picture on the far left, this is a chestnut grove. There were just hundreds and hundreds of acres of chestnut groves that would then morph into the native uh, oak, ash, maple forests that were also interspersed with some of the chestnuts. And I don't know that I've seen a forest that is so revered. I mean, you can kind of see some of the similarities to the Southern Appalachian Mountains from this picture. And as we get in a little bit deeper over the next few days, very similar species as to what I would find in Ireland or Scotland. Some of the same species to the T. Some of them were just Spanish or like continental European variants thereof. Um, but these chestnut forests were so revered, where one of the trees, maybe got hit by lightning or died, it would be cleared and they would plant a new one. You would see the old men and women out checking their groves, walking out with their wellies on and their tipper cap, walking through the wood and just checking on their trees. And their culture is dependent on them for nourishment, for food. um, such a gift. And I actually took a whole 2.5 kilometer detour following a sign that was in English and it said chestnut cakes. And my dad and I went hunting for them. Nothing was open. Um, but at this point, we started seeing some of the same pilgrims that we were sharing the journey with, and we're starting to share food along the way. I've got some pictures of like the heather in full bloom here, and also just some of the beautiful shrines that we saw along the way too. That you could leave little offerings within. So, Ad and I officially entered into Galicia on day 6. The picture in the bottom right demarcates when we crossed into that border. But when we got into the village of Ortabrero, which in Galician means the brain, so it's like the brain of Galicia. It's like the highest ridge in Galicia where all the water goes out in all directions, feeding the very rich, moist Galicia, and then through irrigation, the very dry Leon and area. But Osabrero is like the heart of the Galician Grail mysteries. The church that's in the picture that's in the middle of the bottom of the page is where some of the Grail mysteries are based and housed in. A lot of beautiful stories wrapping around that, but I'm going to use that instead of like talking about the Grail, just segue into Galatia was so reverent. I mean, all of Spain is very reverent to the mother, either to Mother Mary or to the Magdalena, um, in a way that is just to me, because I'm very much a devotee of the mother. Um, I find access to the divine through the sacred mother, if you will, and to enter into a region where the vast majority of the churches and chapels and shrines were devoted to either Mary or the Magdalena was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you'd have a 15-20 foot high Mary or Magdalene inside of the churches, and then a little little tiny Jesus down in the bottom left, and you could really feel it in the fecundity of the earth in this region of Galicia as well. And so all along the way, just really being able to honor the mothers. I was really excited when I came into this monastic town of Samos. Samos in ancient Gaelic is the root of the word summer, and so I kind of got really excited about that. There was this massive Benedictine monastery there that we got to visit, which was really gorgeous. I mean, Benedictine traditions are very far removed from a lot of the traditions that I uphold, in the sense of that greater Catholic heritage, but it's still out of reverence. It was just such a gorgeous sight. The holy springs we saw along the way too, just again being able to collect beautiful water. On the far left, we also saw these amazing granaries. I'm trying to remember what they are in Galician, like horaria or something like that. And basically, because the area is so moist, they would build these stone or brick or out of chestnut huts to keep all of their grains and to keep them dry, and also to keep that big stone that you see underneath each of the corners, keeps any rodents from being able to get up and around and into the grain. So we saw so many different styles of those along the way. But we're starting to wind down out of the mountains now and into more of what are the foothills of Galicia. So as you can see, most of the time we're averaging between 22 and 32 kilometers per day, but we did do a couple of short days. There we go. Another thing, so I was speaking earlier about the about how along the way there was a lot of support for pilgrims, and the support came in the way of refuges, in the way of little shops and restaurants that specifically catered to the pilgrims and gave very special pricing to pilgrims in order to make it really accessible to people of all walks of life. But the other thing that we saw along the way too is like this picture on the upper right. There was this parishioners church, and I'm not sure if this was where a priest or a monk lived, or if it was just a parishioner of the church that I was next to. But basically they just had set out like hot tea, hot coffee, snacks, fruit, and we saw a lot of this all along the way. This is just one of the few times where we had a picture of one of them. But there were places way out in the mountains where there'd just be, a young man or a young woman or a small group of people that have basically like set up these primitive camps where they've got fires and they're just making food for people along the way, because people are hungry. People are all losing weight along this journey. People are all unfolding, realizing it's Sunday, nothing's open in Spain on Sunday. What are we going to eat today? Well, I guess we'll eat wild greens, but to like have this level of just support for people walking the pilgrim's path was absolutely, I want to say gorgeous, but I'm going to pause there and like pull back and say like the thing that really changed something in this journey for me. I'm going to go back one step further. The two most powerful experiences that I've had in my life was becoming a father and then losing my daughter. And I've done a lot of spiritual asceticism over the years and made a lot of journeys. And this experience, this Camino, was number 3 on the most powerful things I've ever done in my life. And part of that is because of the amount of time. Like if you are going to walk the Camino or a similar pilgrim's path, like I did meet a couple of elder Franciscans who told me along the way, and I take this to heart. They said, if you're going to walk, at least walk 300 kilometers, because it takes those first 200 just to slough everything off. And by the time you get within 100 kilometers, you're going to start seeing so many people, because the 100 kilometers is the minimal amount that you need to be an official pilgrim or whatever, to get your Compostela in Santiago. And so a lot of people would fly over and just do those 100 kilometers. And so to have this experience of letting it all down, then coming into the beauty of fellowship as more and more pilgrims began to coalesce because of all the different routes coming together and because we were getting closer to all of these, created this cathartic journey that because of the deeper whys moving me. Every morning I wrote setting intentions for the day, calling in what saints I was calling in to walk with for the day. Every night was writing my experience, but then like what was the deeper like essence, the flowering that unfolded underneath? What's the healing that I can bring back from that? What's the re-illumination of the mind, the imbos, the spark of spirit that can make life worth living when you lose something that's so dear to you? Because in many ways, like as I said earlier, like the last 6 months have been about deconstructing every belief structure in order to see like what is quintessentially the heart of everything that I have pursued. And so to be on this journey, to share the road, to have my own internal process was certainly the third most powerful thing that I've done in my life. And I would suggest that if you ever get into a place where you are stuck in life and feeling down and out about humanity, down and out about something else, and you need to remember why you came here and the beauty of this world, like walk the Camino, walk the Camino, walk the Camino. I don't know that I've ever had such a reminder of what the beauty of humanity can be if we allow it to be. To disentangle all of the political and economic baloney, not just of the 21st century, but of human history. There's nothing new happening anyway. It's all just retellings, new faces, new names of coins that are being used in the exchange. The stories are all the same. Like here, we serve something that is eternal. And so with that, I'm super grateful. So again, as we started moving closer to Santiago from Sarria, Sarria's just a little over 100 kilometers out, we started to share the road with more people. This is Gail and David from Wales, shared the road with them for a while. Interesting enough, also is beginning to share the road with a lot of people from Ireland as well. Really beautiful singing in Irish along the way and sharing of prayers. And of course, we came to one of the ancient Gaelic sites up in the mountains, which you can see in the upper left. The Romans, of course, turned this ancient Gaelic temple and ceremonial site into a fort, just because that's what it served for a conquering civilization to do. But in essence, like as we're getting into this deeper into Galatia, you can see from the pictures up in the upper right, it's starting to turn into more rolling topography. We're seeing a lot more of the way markers, the crosses, the crucifixes. I think I took this one. Yeah, this one is showing, this is facing east, so you can see the Mother Mary holding the infant Christ along the way. We took a picture on my dad's camera of this picture of this cross because it reminded me of some of the Clootie wells in Scotland and Wales, or of some of the holy wells in Ireland where people leave their prayers for healing for their loved ones. And so of course I stopped here and created a Bridget's cross for Ayla, and left it at the next holy well that I came to. The last 3 days, there weren't that many pictures, and part of it is because it started those last few days, those last quick math, last 90 kilometers or so, really became more about the fellowship and the sharing. So there were more of the deep conversations, having dinners out with people that you shared the road with for the day. A lot more of the churches were open, so we could go in and leave one of Ayla's memorial prayer cards in there, light a candle, sing some songs, maybe receive a blessing from someone from the church community. So those days passed really quickly. And the one thing I remember the last night before getting to Santiago was just like, oh my gosh, I don't want this to end. Like, I don't want this to end. I know I still have walking to the sea, but I had some apathy of arriving in Santiago. I felt like there is the high potential for it to be anticlimactic, or something less than, because the journey, the walking, as many often say, is the journey is about the journey itself, not the destination. And wow, yes, to become the journey, to release, to ride suffering and pain into beauty and ecstasy, rapture and fellowship, and to remember the beauty of humanity, once again, was the gift of the Camino. And then coming in to Santiago, it could not be any more unclimatic than I mean, we walked through the last arch and there's a man playing the Gaelic pipes. They're very similar to the Highland pipes. And then to come into the plaza, and I've got this picture up here with this group of school children. These kids were all my daughter's age, that I walked with along the way the last 100 kilometers. And, we sang together, we prayed together, we laughed together. Sometimes we were walking apart, we'd pass each other and give each other high fives. And I'm a kid magnet. I mean, most of you who know me know that, but it's like, I literally walked onto the plaza and like 6 or 8 of these kids just came running across the plaza and jumped on me like we just won like the World Cup. And you can see a couple of them pumping their fists in the background. Those are the ones that were my World Cup walkers. But just like the gorgeousness of sharing the road with these children who are becoming adults, who are my daughter's age, and to feel their story and their willingness to make this journey together. So yeah, a gorgeous, gorgeous landing into the heart of Santiago. And then I made my 3 days on my own. Let's see. Got a few more from here. Oh yeah, so my brother Sam from Sligo, who also spent some of his time in Portugal, came and met my dad and I when we came into Santiago. And then also was able to leave some. So the picture down in the far right here is actually of the interment of St. James underneath of the altar in the main cathedral. So Sam went with me down here, and we said a few of the classic, like Our Father and Hail Mary in Irish, and left another bit of Ayla here, just in gratitude. And so that wraps those 13 days. The 3 days that I did on my own, I don't know that I really got very many pictures of that. So I'm going to, oh, okay, so there's a few pictures from the end. The picture up in the far left was a lifesaver. I walked 50 kilometers that day and was out of water, out of food, and it was almost dark. And I found this holy spring, I want to say it was St. Stephen the Martyr's holy spring. And then, yes, this looks a lot like Ireland or Scotland below, but this is Finisterre, the end of the way, where I was able to say some of my last prayers, goodbyes to some of my daughter's ashes before they were given back to the sea. But I wanted to close with talking a little bit more about like what was the sub context for this conversation, the River of Souls. I mentioned frequently as we've been talking here about how along the way I saw a lot of these shrines and these chapels and temples, crucifixes, ancient trees, huge chestnuts and oaks right in the middle of the way, that I would always just stop, connect, place my hand on them. And the first time I did it, there was very strong communication. This is part of how I connect with the world, how I connect with nature, and how I connect with the divine. But one thing that started to grow with time was that whenever I placed my hands on these trees, these shrines, these standing stones, on these crosses, I would close my eyes and I would see this river of millions of people passing around, through, over me. This river of souls that I had to surrender to, become a part of. I'm just a drop in this great body of water that holds and nourishes this planet, allows for life. And as I surrendered into it, sometimes I thought I could see an individual, not just feel like the water rushing past me, but one of the air bubbles, or the way the sun would hit something so, or just off my eyelashes so, I would see just a set of eyes for a moment. And sometimes it would become even closer, almost like I could reach out with my hands and touch them. Sometimes I would have to kind of like wrap an imaginary tail around the crucifix or this or the tree or the standing stone that I was by, and just let myself drift into this river of souls, surrender into it, and just connect with the beauty and simultaneously the suffering that so many people come with, and let go as they're releasing the hard shell of their worlds from their bodies, as we get a little bit closer and start to recognize the beauty of the other soul sitting across from us at the meal, as we look into the eyes of the beauty of the young baby that comes into our world, and that we're looking into their eyes as they have their own story of why they're here on this larger pilgrimage through life. And sometimes we get to just pause and just share a moment together. So I was reminded in this river of souls along the way of the gift that life is, the beauty that we can experience as people, the beauty of what was, of Christine and I were talking about this other day via messaging about, like, I guess I'm still a father. I was a dad. I am still a dad. I don't have this being to celebrate her successes and failures of life with, but there is a joy of knowing that this soul chose me and her mother as the vessels to come into this world for the short experience that she came here with. And on a broader scope, like all of these beings who I would see in this river of souls along the way, that each person has their own story of why they are walking. And so to be able to really just honor and revere each of the gems that each of us are. And so my biggest takeaway from this whole journey is time, creating time, putting aside all of the doings. And well, in some ways there's a very practical element to that. I don't need to spend all my time making resources to pay for all of the things that my daughter needed anymore. There's a very practical side of it. There's also like, how can I be present with those beings within which I share the road of life, not just the Camino, but truly the way of life together. So I will close it at there. And well, yeah, we did pretty good. We've got about 7 minutes left. And thank my father for walking with me, and thank you for my daughter for walking with me, and thank you to her blood mother, Christy, for also saying yes in such a young point in our lives to bringing this fae being into our world, and for the beauty place that she gets to dwell in now, which she really did not get to harness much of in her last few years with us on this earth. So thank you for joining me along the way, and I'm going to just stop the screen share and just open if anyone wants to reflect, thoughts that you might have, questions that you have. It can even be just questions about the Camino as well, because I know that there's some people here that are also thinking about doing the Camino, or people that will be listening to this in the recording are also interested in walking the Camino. So
Jeremy,
yeah, Naveen.
look who's here.
Hi, Jazz. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good.
Really
Hello,
touched,
Heather.
very deeply. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Well, brother, I wanted to honor Christy also in the call. The beautiful message that you shared, the road that you walk with your father. Very fortunate that your father invited you. What touched me, and I had a lot of times tears come to me just now. God, I really felt her so strong, you know, and being a father of two beautiful daughters is hard for me.
Thank you, Papa.
But and I'll just keep crying more, that because it's so beautiful the way you honor your life is good, and your father and your in the path and we honor her. And I just want to say to you that you in this path, in this work that you did, part of all of us that are connected with you, that I was connected with Ayla in some way, shape, or form. She used to go to school with Jasmine. It manifests in these layers of the shell, and the shell was there before you left. For you to make the necklace, it was all ready. And it was mainly like her way of saying, hey, let's go walk now. Let's walk to infinity, let go of everything, and then more, and then depth. So I just want to honor you, bro. Thank you so much for this beautiful day and sharing so deep. So I wear the shirt you gave me, and thank you for thinking of me and the ancestry of my people, the Spanish and the Portuguese. And reading The Alchemist and El Camino with Paulo Coelho. I was a little bit jealous that I could not be there because somehow I wanted to be there. I just needed to. So anyway, I'll shut up, man. Thank you. I love you, brother. You guys want to say?
We will walk it together sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for inviting us to witness you and sharing your healing journey, your healing pilgrimage. It's so powerful. I'm sure Ayla was with you every step of the way. You brought her a lot of joy and love and healing too through that. So thank you. And thanks for letting me witness and be here with you.
Thanks for saying yes to allowing her to come into the world with me. That wasn't easy at times. A lot of times it wasn't easy. Let's get real.
Yeah, we felt the yes, though. It was a very strong yes. She was supposed to be here.
Yeah. You'll
Thank
appreciate a moment. So my dad, maybe the last 150 kilometers or so, he realized, okay, I'm 72. I've got the old guy card. And there was a couple points where a couple of the, like 4 or 5 of the girls would be walking by with this big Bluetooth speaker, like playing with some rumba, just like, and my dad looked over at him once and he said, hey, turn that off. I'm old. I'm here to be with God. But of course, I was thinking like that's where Ayla would be if she was walking this right now with those girls, like
right.
They were super respectful and turned it off until they were, 100 meters past us and then turned it back up again.
Right. Yeah, they were walking with God in their own way.
In their own way. That's right.
The way that Ayla liked to too.
The way that Ayla liked to. Lots of color.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Chris. Alyssa, did you have something you wanted to say, hon?
No, I just had wanted to come back on video just for a moment.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, be in group. But thank you. It was really beautiful to have you share that with us.
course. Okay. We've got 1.5 more minutes. Anybody else have anything they want to share before we close up? Yeah, thanks for coming, Mark. I will say one other thing. I've been asked to publish the journal that I wrote along the way. I wasn't planning on writing a book, but I am going to publish that. I'm working on it with my publisher in Chicago right now. And also I have created a fantastic list of edible plants along the way as well. There's so many delicious things to eat, from wild greens to chestnuts to berries. Amazing. There's not that many botanists that are walking the way, by the way.
Jeremy, I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your heart. Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie.
And honoring your father. I've been having a lot of physical problems, so my dream is to go on and walk part of the Camino. And for years now, since the COVID thing, prior to that, I was going to move back to Spain and end up in Galicia, and perhaps stay there, who knows. But this is lately, in this new moon and how it came to be, has pointed me in that direction again. So I'm hoping that I can do that this year. I'd love to talk with you one-on-one. Yeah. At some point. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
good to
Maggie.
see everyone. Yeah. I haven't seen Naveen in a long time.
Many years.
Yeah.
Hi, Meg.
You.
Hello.
Beijo,
It's-
beijo.
Muy buen te verte.
Ah,
I miss you, hon. You look beautiful. Keep it up.
yeah, it's nice to see you and your family together. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the whole family. Jasmine,
Yeah.
so good to see you, hon.
I know, it's good to see
Thank
you
you, honey.
too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, and the new Poochie.
From
Yeah.
Chicago.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and
Huh?
stop the recording piece. And then, if anybody wants